welcome to another episode of Two Guys in a Chainsaw. I'm Todd. This month, the month of February, we have decided to do sequels. Now, last month, Todd said that the sequels that we wanted to do should be sequels that in some way, break the mold or go out there. This week's movie was my choice, and I chose House 2. And I don't know if it necessarily really meets Todd's requirement.
Oh, it totally does.
Something.
No, it totally does. Totally.
Okay, all right. My justification is that really the movie is only a sequel in title. It really, aside from also being about a quote-unquote haunted house, it really doesn't have anything to do with the first movie.
There is indeed a house in this film.
There is a really big, cool one. I really like it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it doesn't. I mean, there's no mention of the characters from the previous movie or anything like that. In fact, in the States, I think that there were 4 House movies, and none of them had anything to do with the others.
Yeah.
They were all really kind of standalone. And I think that just capitalizing on the... Apparently the first one was more successful than I realized. Apparently the first one was successful enough that people did want to capitalize on the name. And I guess in Italy there were like 6 or more House movies.
Which were kind of rebranded. I think they were like movies that maybe came out under alternate titles, but in Italy then they just called them House. Again, like you said, to take off of the apparent success of House. Maybe House was big in Italy. Maybe the first one was huge.
Well, I liked the first one. It's just kind of a fun, campy movie.
It is.
And I told Todd before we started recording that I was a little bit nervous to talk about this one because I remember as a kid loving this movie. And I think they must have played it on HBO or maybe even on just standard network cable, but I remember it playing a lot, and I watched it a lot, but it had been a long time since I had seen it, and I sat down to watch it yesterday, and I was watching it, and I'm like, oh man, this is really hokey. That being said, I still really like it, but those of you, all 3 of you who listen, who may be, kind of hardcore horror fans, it's almost a stretch to call this a horror movie. It's really more of a comedy. As I was watching it, as hokey as it is, I think that I remember that the reason that I liked it is because it's actually a really kind of sweet movie. It's kind of cute and sweet, and I like it.
You're right. No, this movie really... okay, so I also have fond memories of this movie because I didn't watch it on TV, and I've only seen this movie once before, and this would have been like in 1988 or 1989, like seriously, like after it came out on video. But, my dad, unlike your dad, my dad has never been a big horror movie fan, and when we would go to the video store, occasionally he would indulge me, and he would be like, okay, we'll pick out a horror movie, and I'll watch it with you. And he usually had to find something that he could agree with, and that also he would deem wouldn't be too gross or gory or explicit for me. And he picked this movie, and we watched it together. And so, I really remember watching this movie with my dad, and both of us really enjoying it, being pleasantly surprised. And this would be, without a doubt, the first quote-unquote horror comedy I ever saw. So this was the first time that it ever occurred to me that you could mix these 2 genres, that you could have a movie that's alternately scary and funny at the same time. Now, looking at this as an adult, to call this movie scary is a bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
But it really has the same flavor and same feel as some other movies that we've talked about here before, such as The Gate, Goonies, Monster Squad. It seems like the movie that's written more with a family in mind than the hardcore teenage horror audience. In fact, this movie's PG-13, and I don't even know why it's not PG.
Yeah, I think it's because, if I remember correctly, they throw in a few F-bombs, and that's the only, maybe, or maybe even not, I don't remember, but it, you're right, it does seem in the same vein as those movies, so therefore it's no surprise to me that I liked it so much, because I love those movies.
Yeah.
You know, the ones that you mentioned are some of my favorite movies, and as I was watching this, I was thinking, wow, this really would be a great movie if you were a parent or an uncle or whatever who wanted to introduce your kid or you know, a young person, if you wanted to introduce them kind of to the genre, but was something that was not really that scary, then this would be a good one to go. Now, I will say that, you know, I was thinking about, oh, I would love to watch this with my niece and nephew, and my sister is very protective and would never let me, I'm sure. But as I was thinking that, I was like, oh, it's fun, and there's a lot of fun things that they would enjoy. Now, I will say that the end, like the big bad guy at the end, is kind of scary. I can imagine children being scared of it, but adults, you know, it's really not all that frightening, but it's fun. There's cute stuff going on, and it's I don't know, you know, people who didn't grow up in the 80s probably would not be particularly impressed with this cast. But for those of us who grew up in the 80s, the people who are in this movie are all pretty recognizable. The movie starts out with just, you know, the title sequence. I really like the music in this movie. I think that the music is fun and interesting, and so, you know, it opens up with this kind of cool music, and you see this crystal skull, and then there are the titles, and then you see this big awesome house. Like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's almost like a castle. It's like this stone house with, like, you know, towers, and then the interior of the house are cool set pieces too. It's kind of, I don't know, it's like Aztec / Gothic. I don't even know how to describe it. But like it's this cool old mansion, but there are all of these like walls and stone pillars that have all of these like I don't know, Native American symbols, or I'm sure they're not really Native American, but
it's supposed to be Aztec, I think. And the interior of it is so goofy. I mean, there is no house that would ever be built like this. It's so over the top. It's like a giant movie set is exactly what it is. It doesn't, the inside doesn't even match the outside, which is fine because you hardly even like see the outside. But it's like if somebody took like an Aztec pyramid. I don't mean it's like if somebody took a house and added an Aztec motif to it. No. It's like if somebody took an Aztec pyramid and tried to fashion a house out of it. That's what this thing is. Some Aztec temple on the inside with like the staircase has these stone pillars on it and a big like dragon or mouths. Oh, it's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Well, and you're right. You know, as big and cool as the exterior of the house looks, when you get inside, it's like sound stages. Like they're these huge, like especially like the foyer or the living area when you first go in. Like it's this huge set piece, with this huge stone fireplace with like a shrine on it.
What's so funny and what makes it even more ridiculous is that hardly anybody seems to notice or care. Like at first, of course, they come in and they stare around the house like, whoa, what a nice big house, right? But like after that, nobody really comes in and remarks, my God, what is this monstrosity that we have come upon? It's just like, oh, so this is where you live.
Well, oh gosh, yeah. I mean, when the main characters eventually move in, it's this young couple, Jesse and Kate, and I'll talk about the actors who play them in a second. But yeah, when they first arrive, they're like, "Oh, look, this is the new house we live in." And then at some point, Kate gets on the phone with like her manager or something, and she's like, "Yeah, it's kind of a dump, but Jesse would never notice that." Like, are you kidding me? Like, it's a huge mansion. Like, oh yeah, it's kind of a dump. Okay.
Seriously. I love this. I love this part where they first come in, because as she's on the phone with her manager, at the same time Jesse just pulls a random book off the shelf, sits down, and then just starts talking to himself.
I don't believe it.
Well, they really need someone.
That's my mom and dad. Yeah, it was pretty cute. That was my grandfather. So he must have been my great-great-grandfather. Jesse McLaughlin. They named me after him.
Yeah, he talks to himself quite a bit, and we also get, like, sometimes, if I remember correctly, we get his inner monologue without him even talking.
Yeah.
You just hear, like, voiceover.
It's so lazy. It's such lazy writing. It's terrible.
It is. Oh, the writing is bad. Oh, gosh. But before we meet these people, the opening scene is this young couple who has a baby. They're in the house, and like it seems like they're scared, and somebody is coming, and so they meet somebody outside, and they hand over their baby to another couple, and then they go back inside, and somebody like they're trying to kind of establish the mystery. So some mysterious shadowy figure shows up and says, "I want the skull," and the guy Clarence and is like, "Oh, we don't have it." And then this mysterious figure shoots Clarence, and then he eventually kills the wife too. It's like this ghostly cowboy. And then we get a black screen, and it says 25 years later, and that's when Jesse and Kate arrive. And Jesse is the baby from the first scene, and wherever he's lived his life, he's now inherited this mansion from his parents who died 25 years ago. I don't really understand how that works out. But okay.
We'll just go with it.
Yeah, and Jesse is played by, I don't know how to pronounce his first name. It's Arye, Ari Gross, I guess. And it's not like he was a big star in the 80s and 90s or anything, but he's really recognizable. He's this short little guy, and what I remember him from was he was kind of the second lead on Ellen DeGeneres' sitcom when she had a sitcom back then. And his girlfriend, I guess, is Kate, played by Lar Park Lincoln, who is probably most known for Friday the 13th Part 7, but she, again, is just another very recognizable face from the 80s. And it's watching this movie again, it was funny to me. I had never really considered, of course, when I was watching it before, I was a kid. Like, we're talking like maybe 8 years old, 10 years old. That was the heyday of when I was watching this.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't really particularly concerned about writing. And it was funny in watching it again today that these secondary characters, like Kate, are totally inconsequential.
Yes, they could be gone from the movie and it would make no difference whatsoever.
Right. And most of the secondary characters leave halfway through the movie. You're just like, why were they there to begin with?
And the funny thing is, you don't even notice.
No, you don't even notice.
When they come
so
back,
funny.
like, oh yeah, I wondered what happened then. Yeah.
So they've inherited this house, and like you said, he finds that photo album, and it's got pictures of his ancestors and whatnot. And the comedy, comes in right away. Like, Jesse hears noises in the house, and he goes and explores, and it doesn't end up being anything. He just gets hit in the face with a fold-out ironing board. Like, it's silly. It's really stuff
silly.
Like that.
And all the comedy is really silly in here, and it's peppered with laugh lines that are they're all groaners. They're all
yeah. I don't know. There's a certain charm to it.
There is. No,
I think.
I agree. There is a charm to it. At one point, I wrote down, this movie is so 80s comedy. Mm-hmm. Like, it's almost culled together from all of the other 80s comedies you've seen. That is the atmosphere of this film. It's those kinds of jokes, that kind of humor, these kinds of situations. They're all recycled from all the movies surrounding it at this time.
Oh yeah, and the characters too are so very 80s. I mean, the next thing that happens is
Two weirdos
people,
arrive.
two weirdos drop by, right? Charlie and Kate. And Charlie is played by Jonathan Stark, who, if you have listened to our podcast, we've talked about before because he was in Fright Night.
Yep.
He was the main villain's like henchman in Fright Night. He, again, a very recognizable face. You know, he's not a leading guy. You just kind of recognize him from things. But really, his career has been in writing. He wrote for Ellen's sitcom. He wrote for Cheers and According to Jim and all kinds of other very successful television shows.
I'll say I really enjoyed his performance in this. I mean, it was totally cheeseball. Like, his character was total cheeseball, but I really enjoyed watching him.
Yeah, he's funny. He's a funny guy. Well, and that's the role he plays. I'm the funny guy. Funny Charlie.
I'm funny Charlie. I was making funny jokes.
And he shows up with Lana, who's played by Amy Yazbek, who was married to John Ritter and, you know, is an accomplished actress in her own right. She was in the Problem Child movies. Just, it's a smorgasbord of 80s. Like, these people are just so recognizable and none of them were huge stars. And so maybe they were just recognizable to me because I had seen them in all of these random things. And eventually Bill Maher shows up, like...
Bill Maher, of all people. So fun.
Of all people. And Bill Maher shows up later on basically playing Bill Maher.
Yeah.
Like, he just shows up as this cynical asshole.
That's right.
And he's got a perm, and it's amazing.
He looks just the same. I mean,
yeah. Except his perm's a little bigger, but
it's a little longer,
he looks the
His
same.
a little longer.
Oh, man. And so Lana is apparently a performer, and her stage name is Puce Glitz and the Avoiders. That's her band name.
That's really funny, actually.
Yeah, she dances. I guess Charlie's plan, I don't even know.
This is so silly.
I don't even know what Kate does, but somehow Kate is somehow tied to people who could maybe help Puce Glitz and the Avoiders get their big start or something. Yes. And that's why they're there. I don't know. Oh, my God.
Charlie has this incredible plan where they are up in the bedroom, and then Kate starts this nipply dance party where she just decides to start jumping around, and he plays a big boombox of, I guess it's her music, and he, like, looks toward the door to see if anybody's out there, and then he cranks it up, and then he jumps in bed like he's reading a magazine or something. And he's like this bizarre way of trying to get Kate's attention, and Kate's on the phone. She's like, wait a minute. What is that music I hear? And she runs into the room.
Oh, hi, Kate. Hey, music too loud. Really?
What is this you're playing?
That's Puce Glitz and the Avoiders.
Puce Glitz?
Yeah, that's my stage name.
This is you?
Yeah, and I'm her manager. Kate, I feel compelled to tell you, we are weighing several offers from some big producers, but to drop names would be tacky.
But you don't have a contract yet. I mean, you haven't signed anything yet, have you?
Oh, no. We don't believe in success.
Yeah, we want to make a lot of money and be real famous, but no success.
No, there's a very subtle difference, you know.
John, I've got to get back to you. I think I may have found what we're looking for.
Yeah, based on 15 seconds
of really bland, not even
pop
remarkable
music.
Pop music. It's so silly.
It is. It's really silly.
And it
it's
has no
hilarious.
point. Actually, there's no point to it except to bring Bill Maher's character there to say some goofy stuff later on.
Yeah. Again, the secondary, except for Charlie. Charlie's important. He plays into the action, but all of the rest of the people, totally inconsequential, really, in the end. Mm. I guess since he found this photo album, Jesse's now interested in, like, researching things. I don't know. But he's been in the basement
talking to himself again.
Talking to himself, having inner monologue, and he's found like these scrapbooks, and he tells Charlie the story of his great-great-grandpa, who was an adventurer, like, again, confusing, because, like, he was a old Wild West guy, but then I guess he was also, like, a worldwide adventurer.
It doesn't make sense at all.
He was an outlaw in the Old West. buy that.
Yeah, look at the skull he's holding. It's made completely out of raw crystal. And this guy in the background, this is Jesse's partner, Slim Reeser. Now, he and Jesse had a falling out over the skull and became bitter enemies. Slim died without ever getting the skull from Jesse.
I don't even understand how he knows all this stuff. I mean, wasn't he just handed over to some other couple at some point?
I guess he just inferred a lot from the pictures. And supposedly this skull was supposed to grant immortality to anybody who found it. So he says, well, he's talking to Charlie, and he's like, well, he found this skull. Well, where is it now? Well, he's just buried up on the hill. Let's go dig him up.
That's basically it. That's basically it. And the next shot is literally them digging him up.
It's them neck deep in a grave digging up Gramps. Well, but they open it up and they find the skull, and that's great. But then also Gramps is alive or undead. I'm not really sure. Anyway, he looks he looks like a corpse. You know, he's decomposed and gray, and the tips of his fingers have worn away. And apparently, he doesn't know this. And Gramps makes the movie for me.
He does.
He's played by Royal Dano, who again, gosh, we can't show you things, you know, when we're just recording audio. But if you saw this guy, you would recognize him. He was in Something Wicked This Way Comes. He was the lightning rod salesman. He was in one of the Ghoulies sequels. He's just this super recognizable old guy, and he is so cute and charming.
So dang cool. He's got a voice. He just has a very distinct voice. Like, you don't even need to see it. And there's nobody else, like, nobody before or after has had a voice like this guy.
God damn. You know, I've been waiting over 70 years for some jackass to get the sense to come dig me up. Thank you, boy.
He's in heavy makeup. This movie's not popular enough for there to be a lot of, you know, behind the scenes information out there. But I wish there were, because I would love to know. One thing that I do know is that they wanted this guy so badly that they hired him, even though they couldn't get their insurance company to cover him because he had just recently undergone heart surgery. But they wanted him so bad they hired him anyway, and I understand why. But, you know, I'd be interested to know about, you know, how long it took this old guy to sit there and get into this makeup, because it's heavy makeup and it looks good. Even in that heavy makeup, he has so much character and humanity in his eyeballs.
Yeah.
Like he's just so, like, endearing and sweet and
cute.
And he's like an old grandpa, like a sweet old cool grandpa. He reminds me of my old country grandpa, and it's just it's just the sweetest thing. But, you know, he comes out of the grave, and at first he's kind of wearing like this Aztec mask, so he's kind of scary, and, you know, if you haven't seen it before, you don't know if he's good or bad. But then when he takes the mask off, he's just kind of this kind-hearted old corpse. And they take him home, and then that's the other thing that is so silly but cute at the same time. There's like, oh, well, nice to meet you. Let's go home. And they take him home, and he has his crystal skull, and he puts it on the mantle with this shrine that has obviously been missing the skull, and like the skull glows and stuff, and he says, this house is a temple, it don't know time or space, but the forces of evil are always after this skull, so we have to take care of this skull. And then they take him down to the basement, that's where they're going to set him up, and he's like, let's go out on the town, I've been, you know, in my coffin for 70 years. They have to kind of, not explain to him, but help him to realize that he is gross. But it's a cute moment. Like, he's like, I'm supposed to be alive. It's not supposed to be like this. And, like, he gets sad and misty-eyed, and it's like it tugged at my heartstrings. Like,
yeah.
It was really I know. It was really sweet.
But then, of course, Charlie's like, sneakily gives him the keys to the car, and they, like, go driving off and end up coming back drinking and staring at the stars and things. At this point, I was like, this is so 80s comedy. Like,
It is.
It's so goofy.
They just go off and get drunk. It's hilarious.
It doesn't even matter. Like, for example, then the next scene is him sitting in front of a television, and he's marveling at the fact that tissues just keep coming and coming out of this tissue box. Like, it's this amazing advanced technology, but he's just been apparently watching old movies, and then he jumps into a Ronald Reagan joke, so that way you know it's the 80s. And then suddenly he says, these movies, books, and crap, they don't tell you how it really was. And I'm thinking, did he just spend the last hour reading a bunch of books and watching a bunch of movies about Westerns? Like, how does he even know to say this, right? Like, it didn't make any sense. And then it starts with this, like, kind of cute but really silly montage where they're sitting around drinking beer and they're listening to him wax poetic about robbing a stagecoach at one time, you know. And it just, it's so goofy, like, now.
It is goofy, but it's cute. Adorable.
It's so adorable.
Like, this cute, sentimental Western music is playing in the back, and Jesse and Charlie are both just looking at him like it's just the most fascinating thing they've ever heard in their life. And like, as cheesy as that sounds, honest to God,
it is.
I have had... I don't still have both of them, but I have had older grandparents, and there's just something charming about when they get into their stories about the olden days, and oh my gosh, it's just so cute. And like, you get the sense that especially Jesse is charmed by this. Like, Kate, his girlfriend, is such... She has nothing to do. She has no opportunity to build character. There's no kind of establishment of their relationship. She just is. She has about 5 minutes of screen time where she just kind of gets to be flighty and bitchy, and that's it. But because of that, you kind of get the sense that Jesse is, longing for something else, and you know that, like, these stories of Gramps' days, are romantic to him. And he's really into it,
and he's reconnecting with the family that he didn't have, and that's kind of what the movie's really trying to build here, is that sense of the orphan who meets his great-great-grandfather in a way that none of the rest of us could. And he's charming, and he's cute, and he's fun, right? So
yeah.
And it
is cool.
And then it's just, oh, gee, look at the time. Well, we better wander on upstairs. And they walk upstairs, and in true 80s movie fashion, suddenly there is a full-blown house party going on.
A full costume party, right?
They just happen to not notice downstairs. Oh, I forgot to tell you, I invited a few people over for Halloween who apparently all showed up, just let themselves in the house and completely decked out the place and, brought food and whatnot.
And then this party scene is funny. The only thing, before we get to the party, when Gramps is talking, I feel like it's important to mention that he tells the story of his nemesis, Slim Reezer. And it's very simple. That, when Gramps found the skull, Slim wanted it, and, they had a disagreement about that, and Gramps said, well, I shot the old scallywag. That was the end of that, but he doesn't really want to talk about it anymore. The reason that it's important is because Slim shows up at the end as the bad guy. Also, at some point, John Mayer showed up. Or, not, is that his name? Not John Mayer. John Mayer's a singer. That would be really weird if he showed up.
Like, what?
Bill Maher.
Bill Maher
showed up.
He shows up
Bill
at the
Maher showed up.
Did he show up at the party? He showed up at... No.
He showed up a little bit before. It doesn't really matter. And
right.
Again, his character is pretty inconsequential too, except it's apparent that he is interested in Kate, and then throughout his time there, he's constantly trying to sabotage Jesse and make Kate not like Jesse, and eventually it works, and then they leave. And like that's it. That's the whole purpose of their characters.
That's so true.
Oh
man.
But this party, it's funny. It's this huge party, and Gramps, comes to the party because it's a costume party. And
he
nobody,
blends right in.
Questions who he is, and Gramps is dancing with some young girl, and it's super cute. And then there's this totally kind of inconsequential, lame plot point where one of Jesse's ex-girlfriends, Rochelle, shows up, and it's like kind of all over him for no apparent reason.
Immediately just rubbing all over him and stuff like that. And he hardly even seems to care.
Yeah, well, he doesn't even notice, really. Yeah. But Bill Maher sees, and then Bill Maher tells Jesse's girlfriend, Kate, and then eventually she comes and slaps him. It's all very stupid and inconsequential. Really, the point of the party is that while the party is going on, and fortunately it's a costume party, so anybody dressed as anything can show up and nobody's going to question it. But a door opens in one of the upstairs rooms, and smoke kind of, or fog, rolls out, and this huge caveman comes out and comes down through the party, and is kind of pushing people aside. And one of the people he pushes aside is a guy in a gorilla suit who is Kane Hodder, for our horror friend fans out there. Kane Hodder, one of the original Jason Voorhees, in a very small cameo.
The movie was produced by Sean Cunningham, who directed the original Friday the 13th and produced a bunch of them. Yeah.
Look at you. Good research.
It was one of the first things I noticed, is like his second credit that came up.
It's awesome. I know. I didn't look at that. But anyway, this caveman comes in and he steals the skull. Gramps, when the caveman is walking towards the skull, Gramps steps in front of him and says,
"You better pack your ass in this suitcase and head for Panama."
Just the funniest shit.
Oh, these lines.
I swear to God.
These lines are so goofy. So goofy.
They are so goofy. Oh, my God. Oh, but anyway, the caveman steals the skull and takes it back to where he is, and then Jesse and Charlie are like, "Oh, no, he stole the skull." And Gramps is like, "Well, I have to have it. If I don't have it, I'll die. You have to go get it." And so there's a whole lot of goofiness leading up, like they're meeting up, Jesse and Charlie meeting up outside the room, and Jesse's like, "Oh, well, I had this in the trunk. You never know when you're going to need one." And he pulls out an Uzi. He's got a machine gun in the trunk of his car.
It's really not an 80s movie without an Uzi coming into play at some point. That was like our thing. I don't know why we were so fascinated with Uzis back then.
I don't know either, and who knows what an Uzi.
I don't even know what an Uzi is, but we all talked about them when we were kids.
Yeah, we liked saying it a lot.
Uzi.
So they open up this room and they go in, and this is, kind of in keeping with the first movie.
It is.
Like, you could go into these rooms and it would be kind of like alternate universes or whatever.
Yeah, universe. It's the jungle room.
So they go into this prehistoric jungle.
I thought it was a nice touch. I thought it was cool that as they're going into the jungle, there's like a lamp in there. like it was still like a little bit of the room left before they went out into, way more. And I actually thought, I was impressed that this, this had to be a fairly low budget movie. The special effects aren't too bad for the time. Like the stop motion kind of stuff they do is a bit in the Ray Harryhausen vein, but they don't really try to avoid them. Mm-hmm. I mean, they will go full on with the creature effects. They're giving it their all, but they're not trying to shoot it in a way where they don't have to show a creature.
Right.
For better or for worse.
Yeah, and if you want to be critical, it's not Jurassic Park, by any stretch of the imagination. They go in there and there are, these stop motion dinosaurs, and they look very B-movie. They look very Clash of the Titans.
Yeah, they're jerky.
And not only am I fine with it, I actually find it's charming.
Yeah, I
and
agree.
endearing.
Yeah.
And so they go in there and they fight the caveman, and then like they get the skull back.
I love how they just wander around through this jungle and the skull's just like sitting on a rock.
Right, like it's like 10 yards in. Like it's let's find it. Let's look around. Oh, there it is.
Yeah, I know.
just sitting there unattended.
And why? Why did the caveman even did he just need a buddy? Like, what was he doing with it in the first place?
I don't know. He must be a force of evil caveman. Yeah. I don't know. But when they get it, God, it's just so funny and cheesy, and I love it. Jesse grabs the skull and he takes it in one hand and thrusts his arm up in the air and says, "The skull is ours!" And then a pterodactyl swoops in and steals it.
Drops it in its nest.
On top of this huge tree.
This gigantic, like, redwood tree. And what do? They go to the tree and Jesse can scale this tree.
And it's like, oh gosh, it just looks so silly. Like I was paying attention, and like it's just kind of this little silhouette cardboard cutout, like that they're just kind of scooting up the tree. Like only one of the legs actually moves. Like
bad.
one of the legs just kind of drags along.
It's their best effort, but we were used to this sort of thing back then too. This kind of happened. But at this point, that he gets up to the top of the tree and he reaches in for the skull, but instead a little pterodactyl baby jumps out, and he has this half-hearted comedic back and forth with this pterodactyl baby who is, chomping at him while he's trying to get the skull. And the music in the background is this whole... At this point, you have to take stock of the movie you're looking at. And if you thought you were getting a horror film,
Yeah.
you find this yourself about half an hour into this movie, and there's a guy at the top of a tree fighting with a baby pterodactyl over a crystal skull.
And meanwhile, there's like something scary crawling around underneath the moss behind Charlie, like stalking him. We don't know what it is, but the music makes it sound very scary. And then Jesse falls out of the tree, and like as he's falling, which takes like 10 seconds, he's like, "Catch me, Charlie, catch me, catch me." And Charlie's just standing down there like, "I got you, bro, I got you." And Jesse hits the ground, and they fall through the floor of the jungle into the basement where Gramps is. And Gramps says, "Why didn't you use the stairs?" Oh my god.
Oh, it's so dumb.
So funny. When Charlie kind of, regains his senses, he realizes there's something on his leg, and he freaks out and he's screaming. He's like, "Ah, it's eating my leg, it's eating my leg." And it ends up being, I don't know what the word for it is.
pillar.
A dogger pillar.
That's the only way I can consider. It's like an oversized caterpillar with a dog's head.
Oh my god, and it's so cute. And it's a puppet, like it's just so evidently a puppet, like, foam rubber, but it's adorable. And they keep it. Like that's the other cute thing, like they keep this catterpupper or what, I don't know what it is.
Catterpuppy.
And they eventually end up keeping the baby pterodactyl too. And like then the pterodactyl goes running around, and it's still got the skull and
in its mouth. Oh my god.
Yeah, and Jesse's trying to get it, and he's in the kitchen, and at this point, I'm just going to call him Bill Maher, because Bill Maher wants...
John, but
John. He wants to catch Jesse in something, and so, like, he's trying to get into the kitchen, and Charlie's trying to get him out, and but they eventually get in there, and it's kind of a funny scene when he's confronting Jesse, and he's like, "Well, do you have something to hide? I mean, what's going on?" And he's like, "Oh, fine, I'll tell you." And he's like...
All right, now Charlie and I, last night, went to the cemetery and we dug up my great-great-grandfather's grave. Because we were looking for a crystal skull. It's supposed to be magic. Anyway, we dug it up, and we got the skull, but we also found my great-great-grandfather. He's dead, but he's alive. I mean, he's a mummy, and we brought him back, and he's been staying in the basement. And Charlie and I have just been running through this jungle trying to get the skull back. And that's who's in there for your information, Mr. Sherlock Holmes.
But then he opens the closet, and Rochelle is in there. Why? I don't know. She's just been waiting around.
It's so dumb.
Drunk, waiting.
And the other thing about it is, it doesn't even make any sense, because he's standing in front of this tall, like floor-to-ceiling style pantry door in the kitchen. But the last place he chased a pterodactyl into was this small cabinet above the sink. Mm-hmm. So why he's standing in front of this giant door and hiding it doesn't even make any sense.
Well, it also does... Okay, so I guess maybe they were in prehistoric times for a while, but when they left, there was a huge party going on, and when they come back, there's nobody there.
There's nothing. Nothing. Oh, man.
But that's okay, whatever.
Yeah.
So anyway, as it turns out, Kate and the singer, whatever her name is, and John, they all leave, and we never see them again. The end. Bye.
She slaps
nice
him
to see you.
There you go.
Yeah. Whatever, bye. And it turns out that Gramps was playing a joke. There was like a revolving wall in the closet, and so he was on one side and Rochelle was on the other, and eventually he says to Jesse, well, I think I was in the mood to play a joke, but I'm sorry that you were the one I played it on. It's just so silly but sweet too, and they get the skull back, and there's a cute little moment where Gramps gives the caterpillar beer in a baby bottle. Adorable. But when Gramps is trying to put the skull back, he gets attacked by Aztecs. I mean, just, terrible stereotypical representation of
Zulu
these
warriors
people,
or something. Yeah, who knows?
Yeah. But he gets attacked, and then... So when Jesse wakes up in the morning, he finds Gramps, knocked out on the floor. And again, this is so dumb and inconsequential, but even the stuff that they were doing with the little caterpillar puppet, when Gramps got knocked out and the little caterpillar puppet was worried about him and trying to wake him up, I was like, aw, dogs are the best.
You're such a dog owner. Oh my god.
I know, shut up. That leads up to the next adventure.
It's episodic. It's kind of, I was even thinking, I don't know why, but I was just getting shades of Waxworks in here too, right?
Yeah, definitely.
These little episodic adventures into different lands and different worlds. But this was my favorite part of the movie.
It's super fun.
Oh my god. And I actually give them a lot of credit for this bit. When Cliff from Cheers comes in.
Yeah.
John Ratzenberger? Is that his name?
Yeah.
Who you know. I mean, his voice. This guy, again,
yes.
Just like Royal Dano. He's a man all his own, and there's nobody who will be like him. He comes in as an electrician, and it just comes out of the blue. Somebody called me, said, because way earlier on in the movie, their lights weren't working in one of the rooms or something. And he comes in, he's no nonsense.
What is the fuse box down there in the basement?
Listen, Bill, I'm sorry to trouble you, but this really isn't the right time.
It's all right, Jess. I'm not going to get in your way. You just show me what needs fixing. This is quite a room you got here. Yeah, very, very nice. It's a weird fireplace, though.
Yeah, Bill? Bill.
What do we got in here? Ah, there it is.
It's just funny because it's this huge pause in the action where there's this urgency to get the skull and to rescue the skull from these Aztecs, but Jesse has to deal with the electrician who wanders in first. He wanders out and he grabs a sword along with... at this point I was wondering whatever happened to the Uzis. But anyway, he and Charlie grab swords and decide they're going to go into the fireplace to go into this Aztec. But now, correct me if I'm wrong, was the fireplace sealed back up again? Was it a big pit? What was the deal? Why did they decide they weren't able to go into the fireplace after these? I
don't know. I never really understood. Charlie pokes his sword in there and they hear some kind of scary noise, but then they don't. I feel like they just get interrupted by Cliff. I don't know what is it, John, whatever, the electrician.
Electrician who's been back there pulling the wires out of the wall and revealing a hole or whatnot.
There it is. Looks like you got some kind of alternate universe in there or something.
And of course, he plays it totally straight and totally nonchalantly that, I'm sorry, this is high comedy as far as I'm concerned. The rest of the movie's been low. This is high.
John Ratzenberger is hilarious in this movie. He really is so funny.
And so this is like you said, they dive into this medieval or, Aztec, whatever, temple. It's like Indiana Jones or Sherlock Holmes or whatever. And they walk in, and sure enough, they come into the interior of this Aztec temple, and they look down and see that this priest is about to sacrifice a virgin, or at least Charlie says, "Do you think she's a virgin? Because I've never seen one of those." Stupid lines. But But it's funny because the electrician just is like, he says, well, I'm prepared for this. And he pulls out his toolbox and he opens it up and he's got a saber in there too. Like he's done this a million times as well.
Oh, yeah.
It's hilarious. I really like this part just because
it's really funny.
It's so funny. And they go in there and they rescue the girl. That's basically it. And grab the skull at the same time.
Yep. And it's, they're swinging on ropes and they're sword fighting like they sword fight every day.
I know. It's one of those moments where suddenly these guys can do anything. And they're so nonchalant about it, too. Like, Jesse's like fighting a guy with a sword and another guy comes behind him and he swings a sword around and knocks him off. And then another guy approaches him from behind and without even turning around, he whacks him with his arm and he falls into the pit, too. And the whole time he's smiling and seems like only half interested in what's going on. It's one of those.
and the electrician is like, I'll hold him off. You guys go ahead, get back. And he sends them back, and they're like, oh, I don't see him behind us. Oh no! And they get out, and he's standing out there like polishing up his tools, like, oh, I was starting to get worried about you, like. And then when he leaves, he hands them his card, and it says, Bill Towner, electrician and adventurer. Adorable.
Yeah, it's cute.
And then we get the next scene right away. We cut to this
wacky dinner scene.
Wacky, but so cute. Like, it's this family dinner, and it's Gramps and Charlie and Jesse and the Virgin who speaks no English and the pterodactyl and the caterpillar.
It's cute, but it's so dumb.
I thought it was adorable. And they're all sitting around, and Charlie's like, oh, somebody should say grace. And, like, Jesse looks at Gramps, and Gramps nods like, yeah, you should do it. And so Jesse, like, says grace or gives this toast or whatever, and he's like, I consider you all my family. Like, as cheesy as it sounds, I appreciate how everybody just ran with it. Like, the guy who is playing Jesse, he plays it sincerely, like you guys are my family now. Like,
yeah.
Pterodactyl.
In the meantime, there's like setting a place for the pterodactyl and they're putting fruit in front of him and stuff. It's so dumb. But it's cute. I get where you're coming from. And especially...
I think it's cute.
Yeah, it's funny. But you do get the sense that at this point in the movie, I mean, we're only like 10 minutes away from the ending credits. Like, they felt like they had to wrap it up.
It's certainly silly. There's no question about that. But it's fun, sweet, silly. I like it. But so anyway, they have, the food on the table, and I guess the entree is covered by this big bell jar or whatever, and Jesse lifts it up, and then this scary cowboy rises up out through the platter, through the table, and it's Slim, the nemesis of Gramps' nemesis. And Gramps is like, I knew you'd come. I've been waiting for you. And Charlie tries to grab a knife, and Gramps is like, no, he's mine. But then Slim shoots Gramps, and Gramps goes down, and Slim takes the Virgin girl, who, by the way, is this gorgeous Playboy centerfold.
Yeah.
Who has no lines because she doesn't speak any English. She's just there to be pretty girl number one. And Charlie goes and chases after them like he's going to rescue the girl. And we're left with Jesse and Gramps, and Gramps is like, you have to get him. Here, take my gun, you'll need this. He's the one that killed your ma and pa. And so Jesse goes off on his mission, and he goes off to this room that we've seen before, which is like kind of this Wild West themed room with like, all these taxidermied animals and things in it. And when he opens the curtains to the window, he sees that the window opens up into the Wild West. And he goes out there, and Charlie and the Virgin are strung up on the gallows and gagged. And Slim comes in on his stop-motion corpse horse.
I like that. Again, this is where I feel like, man, it looks kind of bad, but
it does.
They tried, and I really appreciate that they didn't pull any punches here. They were giving it their all. Yeah.
It is what it is, and I do appreciate that they went for it. It doesn't look great. It's not, it's not the greatest effects you've ever seen.
It's not
but
terrible, though.
No, it's not. I like it. they kind of have a shoot off, and Jesse gets shot in the arm, and he ends up back in the house, and then Slim is just kind of randomly stalking him around the house for a little bit, which was actually, I thought, kind of stupid.
Yeah, it was really dumb.
It went on for too long.
Yeah, it's just one of those sequences where you just lose the energy of the pursuit, and it loses all logic, and suddenly you just get one scene after another scene of a character just quietly creeping through a room waiting for something terrible to happen to him.
Right. And Slim has, like, the gremlin voice, and, like, Jesse! He just keeps saying his name. It's silly. Anyway, eventually the cops show up because they've heard gunshots, and I guess wherever they live, the way that the cops work is if they hear gunshots, they just surround the house with a SWAT team, and they're like, we're going to shoot you!
We're going to shoot you if you don't come out. Yeah, it's great cops.
Eventually, Slim and Jesse end up facing off again, and Jesse shoots literally his head off, shoots Slim's head off, and he gets the skull back. He goes back to Gramps, who's laying in a bed, and he's got the skull, and Gramps, again, is super cute. Did you blow his head off? That's a good boy. I thought for sure he'd kick your ass, but I didn't let on know. Like, I can't tell you how much this guy reminds me of my mom's dad, who passed away a long time ago, but he was just so country, and then they just have this very sweet farewell where Jesse's like, well, I've got the skull, now you're okay. And he's like, no, I've done everything I wanted to do in this life. And he says, you keep the skull and get from it what you want, and then get rid of the goddamn thing. He says, I love you, and they embrace, and Gramps says, I love you too, Jesse. And again, Royal Dano, in this heavy makeup, his eyes are just so expressive. Like, it just... Oh my God! And he's teary-eyed, and it's not even really a sad moment. It's just so sweet. And he dies, and then the cops say they're going to count to 10 till they open fire, and then it turns out that Slim, even though he has no head, is still alive, and he stands up and he shoots at Jesse, but Jesse ducks, and so the cops think that somebody's shooting at them, so they open fire. I guess the cops' fire takes out Slim. And Jesse grabs Gramps' corpse, and he grabs the caterpillar and the pterodactyl, and he goes walking through this door that's just, it looks like the bright lights of heaven or whatever.
Yeah.
And he walks through, and then it's the last scene, and Jesse places the skull on a burial mound of stones, presumably Gramps, and we see Charlie and the Virgin waiting for Jesse on an Old West stagecoach, or not really a stagecoach, but a wagon, and they ride off into the sunset together, like...
Along with the Doggerpillar and the pterodactyl.
Yeah, and they're apparently just going to live happily ever after in the Old West, and...
Oh, man.
It's lovely.
It is. I have to say, so the first house I really enjoyed, and it was a little silly, but it was scary. It was R-rated, and it had, it was not nearly as silly and as funny as this one was. This one is definitely different from the other one in a major way, I think. Like you said, they're tangentially related. At the end of the day, they're two very different movies. But there's a certain charm to this film, and we've been talking about it throughout. And for its time, it was one among... I mean, it was kind of like I said, it just felt like Monster Squad all over again. Kind of a low-rent Goonies / adventure story of crazy things happening to everyday people in fantastical ways that you can watch with your family. Nowadays, man, I don't know. Maybe
no, I don't think it would play over very well.
Doesn't really work, and the jokes don't really work. It's just not sophisticated enough. It is kind of disappointing. I mean, honestly, I enjoyed watching it again. I enjoyed revisiting it. I kind of want to watch it again with my wife because it's totally safe for her, and she might get a kick out of it. But honestly, I don't think I'll watch it again. And it's kind of sad that I remembered it being just a little edgier than it really was. Yeah. Man, I must have been really young to think this movie was edgy. I remember it so fondly too, and in watching it again
from a critical perspective, I was able to say, oh, okay, like this really isn't a good movie, but I will watch it again. In fact, this is one of those movies that I would just put on anytime. If I'm cleaning the house, if I want to take a nap, like, this would just be something great for me. And I'm sure that it has to do with my nostalgia for it, but if I woke up for a few minutes from my nap to see that little caterpillar or or something, it's just cute. Like, and I don't have kids, but you do, and I would think that this, when Kenji gets to be of a certain age,
he would love this movie. He would. Yeah, he really would. But then past a certain age, he would not like it at all.
Right, probably not.
Yeah, but it just leaves you with questions like, what the hell does a skull do anyway? Like,
right.
You know what I mean? Like, everybody wants it and whatnot, but there's nothing clear in the movie why it's really that important. All it does is sit on a shelf and glow.
Everybody wants it, and it's so important, and we have to protect it from the forces of evil, but at the end, just, leave it in a pile in the desert.
Exactly. But
it's out of my hands.
I will say, though, this movie is better than it gets credit for. Like, it has like a lousy, I think it was at 0% at one point on Rotten Tomatoes. I think it has a 10% now. You could find hardly anything about it online, and I can't figure that out. I can't figure out why, because we've seen so many movies that are so much worse than this.
Yeah, well, I mean, it premiered alongside The Color Purple and some other big blockbuster movie, and so upon its release, it got lost in the shuffle, which fine, whatever. I'm a little bit surprised that it played in theaters at all, but
it does have a straight-to-video feel to it.
What I do know is they rushed it into production. Apparently, again, with the success of the first movie that I was unaware of, they wanted to get a sequel right away. So they rushed it into production, and the screenwriter only had 2 weeks to write the script, which maybe explains some things.
It shows.
and it premiered a year after the release of the first one, so they really rushed into it. But whatever, can I even really say it's a good movie? No, but I really enjoy it. I think it's fun. It makes me wish I had kids so that I could sit down with my 8-year-old. If this is the first scary movie we're going to watch, okay, you may see some things that are going to be a little bit scary, but it's just pretend. And it's that safe. And ultimately, nobody dies. Well, except for Gramps, but he's old and whatever. Anyway, I still appreciate it. I know it's not a great movie, and if you're listening to this and you have any thoughts about this movie at all, please share them. I hope that there are those of you out there who can appreciate it for what it was, or those of you who are about our age who maybe have fond memories of it. But I'm not going to recommend it as some sort of gem or anything. It's just it's cute and sweet, and I'm a sap, and I like that sweet stuff. And
it's kind of a time capsule. It's 1987 is written all over it, And for that, if you're like us and you're nostalgic for that, I think you'll enjoy it to an extent.
To an extent.
Put that caveat on there.
Okay, fair enough. All right, well, thank you for listening to another episode. If you enjoyed this episode, we have lots and lots and lots of back episodes. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher. And we'll be back with you for the next couple weeks doing some more sequels. And we'll get into some grittier stuff than House 2. Anyway, until next time, I'm Craig.
And I'm Tom.
With Two Guys and a Chainsaw.